NFTs has been a $17 billion industry. Now, every investor has to be up to date and has to catch up with the latest developments and news in the industry. Now, it's really hard. I know, as a mother and as a business owner and as an individual, it is really hard to follow up on everything. And, after all, this is a fast evolving sector, and there are so many dramatic changes that happens in a blink of an eye. And not to mention that there are so many new communities and new projects that are dropping every day. And we're all trying to keep up with all the changes and all the updates. Now, since it's 2022, more and more people are shifting into audio service providers. Now, saying that, finding the best NFT podcasts have become crucial to stay up to date with the latest news. So I always had a dream to have a podcast, to host myself a podcast. But hosting a podcast, it's a dedication. It's time consuming. It's energy. It's to dedicate yourself 100% into that, or better not do it. So today, I am very, very happy to host some of the most successful podcasters at the NFT space. Now, some of them are going to share with us some insights. Some of them are going to share with us some experience in the field. But I am very thrilled because myself, I'm always curious to hear about the behind the scenes of podcasters, who are people who dedicate their lives, dedicate their time, their energies, their efforts for the audience, for their communities. They are sitting there, interviewing people, running through places, traveling the world, and being in the most up-to-date and the most exciting places and meeting the most exciting people and getting to interview the most amazing human beings, individuals in the space. So I'm going to start off with, we have here the Edge of NFT. Hey, good morning, and how are you? And who's behind the scenes there?
What's going on? Good morning, everyone. This is Josh,
Hey.
representing the NFT LA account, and I'm here with Jeff Kelly, one of our trio on Edge. I'm not sure if Ethan will be able to join us or not, but you got 2 out of 3.
Amazing. That's more than I could even ask. So guys, if you don't know the Edge of NFT, I don't know what under rock you live on, but these are one of the top podcasts that relates to NFT. The team is built out of serial entrepreneurs and businessmen like Joshua. They have Jeff, we have Ethan, and they're amazing, amazing team who creates amazing podcast. And it's been they've been out there for a while now. Their podcast brings up the top 1% of what's going on in the NFT world. And you can listen to them and watch them on Spotify. They also have a YouTube channel, and they also have a Discord channel where they keep the community up to date and connected. So I'm so honored to have you here, Josh. I'm so happy that you joined us today. I got to meet Josh in LA in a restaurant. They also do, of course, the NFT LA, this amazing, the amazing event that took place a few months ago. And I'm so humbled to have you here with us. And it's amazing, that you can always be found in the most exciting events and conferences. And it feels like as you always been ahead of a game of a lot of people, with so many interesting speakers and events coverage. I know that recently you guys took part of the Davos, which is, for those who don't know, it's one of the world's biggest financial summits that is held in Switzerland. And it's also including now marketing and technology. And obviously, they talk about DeFi and crypto. And it's where the greatest minds and biggest thinkers around the world are gathering into one place. So, Josh, I'm super curious to hear a little bit more about that. What kind of insights do you have? I know you guys have been there. You covered some interviews. Share with us a little bit of the insights of your visit in Davos.
Right on. Well, first, just to clarify, NFTLA was by all means a team effort. We had over a dozen core team members that were able to pull that event off, and a lot of auxiliary folks on production side, probably another 30 or 40. So I'm only one of many folks that were involved in pulling that off, and we're looking forward to coming back next year bigger and better, and continuing to sort of keep the community involved in some exciting announcements there. Second, well, I was in Davos. Jeff was at VCon with hanging out perhaps in some of the same circles as Shani. So when we get back to VCon, I'm sure that Jeff would have some really cool insights there. He sat down with Gary Vee for 15 minutes talking about the conference and his roadmap, and I'm sure there's some alpha in that convo. So, but happy to talk about Davos first. Just wanted to mention that.
Perfect. Amazing.
Yeah, so Davos was pretty exciting. You know, this was a transitionary year for Davos in that they originally were planning to do it in January, but due to COVID, they pushed it back to spring. So this is my first time doing Davos, and I had a chance, with Ethan on the ground. We actually had 6 people on the ground. We had Ethan and Audrey and Derek and Lawrence from our team, and my girlfriend, was willing to sort of share our vacation with her helping with production in Davos, which was pretty amazing. So shout out to Sophia for being such a good sport there. But with regard to Davos, it was quite a unique opportunity in that the last Davos occurred before COVID 2 years ago. And a lot has changed in our society the last 2 years, namely NFTs and Web3 are now like in the dictionary, right? Which wasn't the case 2 years ago. And so the other thing that happened is that rather than one or two, so the way Davos works is there's this big economic summit that happens that's invite only, and you have to have a special badge and security is super tight. But then there's this one street called the Promenade where all these different houses are on with big companies, social impact projects. And this year there were 5 or 6 NFT houses. There was a church that Filecoin took over. There was a bar that became the Crypto House, and they changed the label. And then Casper Labs partnered with a bunch of companies and created the Blockchain 2022 experience, which is really cool. Next to that was a medical psychedelic house that came for the first time, which also featured a lot of NFT projects. And down the street was a polka dot house that was all pink and black polka dots where Gavin Wood spoke at. So just to get the lay of the land, you pay an obscene amount of money for a chalet that's really small, and you have like millionaires, billionaires, leaders of companies crammed in together in these chalets. And then everyone's just hanging out in these different houses on this one street that everyone crosses by. And it takes about 20 or 30 minutes to walk there due to all the blockades and security issues. And then there's these open thought leadership sort of formats where sometimes you're in a room with these people that you think there should be 2,000 or 3,000 people, and it's just like you and 30 thought leaders. Ran into the sort of head of Telos on the street and learned all about what they're doing. Ran into the Ministry of Trade for Singapore on the street and learned about what they're up to with Web3. Happened to, accidentally stumble into the Ukraine house. I was trying to meet with the head of digital assets, Alex, but it was a press conference where the First Lady of Ukraine was remoted in, and we had an hour with the First Lady talking about Ukraine and where it's going with the war and trying to create some hope and inspiration for the masses. So this thing was incredible. Like, if you're interested in bigger conversations around the future and where things are going, Davos is definitely worth considering. And it's interesting because it started in a very conservative way, traditional in a lot of sense. And now the non-traditional component, being these houses that are on the street to the summit, have sort of taken over prominence. And because it was a halfway Davos on the way to January, it was a little smaller and a little bit more intimate, and the weather was perfect. So people are just hanging out, and you're just meeting like incredibly special people from all over the world talking about where Web3 is going. So I just want to paint that picture. Happy to get into details on what we did, what we covered, who we spoke with, what were some of the interesting insights. But I wanted to share that sort of high-level overview with everyone, if that's helpful. I hope it is.
It's amazing. Yeah, go for it, David. Hmm.
Quick, great to speak with you always, bro, always. And what I'm hearing from you is like we're talking VCon, we're talking like literally like NFT NYC like squared like in the same year essentially. But what I'm hearing from Davos, that's something very, very interesting and unique. It seems like that is the global stamp of approval from every financial monolith that NFTs, DeFi, cryptocurrency is so baked into the financial foundation that it can no longer be denied. The fact that we're seeing these things happening at this level. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think that's a nice synopsis, and I'm still processing everything because it was a pretty intense 4 days. But yeah, like everyone's curious, right? I had lunch with a private banker that oversees a $260 billion fund, and they now have a digital transformation arm. So what you get in the institutional side is more of this conversation around digital transformation, around sort of digital asset management, around institutional custody of NFTs, around real estate NFTs, around utilizing NFTs for business. And that's really exciting to me. There wasn't in using NFTs for social impact or film or media. Everything was very practical, but very much how do we as a society leverage this interesting technology to make the world better. There was no conversation about the decline in the market. There was no conversation around PFP projects. It was all about massive mainstream use cases of NFTs and Web3.
And that's exactly what we want to hear, because that isn't short-term thinking. That's long-term thinking.
Exactly. It's looking at the big picture rather than looking at the flip or the hype and so many conversations that are around what's going on now instead of what's going to be in the future.
Yeah, it was special, guys. We did about 20 pieces of content. We've released some of them on our website. I'm sorry, on our social link. LinkedIn is the popular tool there. No one uses Twitter. There was in LA, you get these, what's your Instagram handle or what's your Twitter handle? There, it's like, let's connect on LinkedIn, right? So you'll see a lot of the conversation about Davos on LinkedIn. Had a really fascinating conversation with the current head of blockchain for IBM, which you'll see on our show, an upcoming show, talking about using NFTs for travel and ticketing, for like Travelocity using NFTs, something like that, right? This was a use case that they're exploring actively. And IBM, this is fascinating, guys. IBM has changed their entire mission statement and mantra to be open, transparent, and Web3 focused. This is a global shift in the IBM culture that this gentleman is leading.
This is truly amazing. And I would really love to hear more about who did you speak with? Who did you get to interview? Who did you get to special figures or anything that you want to share from your inner insights? Because a lot of people, want to create a podcast or curious about what exactly happening behind, the closed doors over there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's see. Who else did we speak with? It's a whirlwind. Well, we did do a show with the team at Wonkly, which is a really interesting sort of OpenSea killer that I wasn't aware of. And Wonkly, WOONKLY, they just got a major investment from Mr. Pink. Not financial advice, but they seem to be thinking about a lot of the issues we've learned about the last year with creators being onboarded, with challenges with sort of a stable token economy for a platform that's sort of owned by the community. This guy went really deep, and we'll see what he's going to build. But I was fascinated by how thoughtful their white paper is, and the fact that Mr. Pink is now the lead stakeholder says a lot. So that was one person, one set of folks that, and that'll be posted as an episode. What was another interesting conversation? There's so many, right? I really enjoyed meeting the leadership team at Telos. Telos is, theoretically, they proclaim the greenest NFT solution there is out there. And they've been building, a lot of stuff. And they don't have, they answered honestly that their biggest weakness is the amount of activity currently on Telos. But on the strength side, one thing they have going for them that I thought was really cool is they have this thing called SocialFi, where you can, using Telos NFTs, you can communicate with the owner of the NFT directly and historical owners. And that history can be publicly available if chosen by the NFT project. So imagine, David, you're doing an NFT and Bon Jovi buys your NFT and then sells it to his manager, and then they give it away to a fan. You have that whole history of that sort of world and the conversations being had by all parties actively on the NFT. So Telos does that right now, and it already works. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's really fascinating stuff. I just to pivot back to the whole notion of podcasts, and Josh, you're such a great warm spirit. You have a very sort of trusting energy about you, so that really works to your advantage. But when we're talking about interviewing people, I always think about Howard Stern. Like, he's probably like the founding father of the podcast when he was doing it on terrestrial radio, now on satellite radio. And, he always jokes that, there would be no podcast without Howard Stern. But what Howard does really well is that he really knows how to engage a person and get some vulnerability out of them. Can you offer any insights to the community here that's interested in podcasts on how best to engage a guest to really get pieces of their story that otherwise may have not been shared on other platforms, or how to create that comfort component when you're interviewing someone?
Yeah, let me kick it back to Jeff for a moment. A lot of our curation of the show falls in his court, and I've been talking a lot. Jeff, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, let me do that. So I think it's a great question, and for us, our approach is built on authenticity, and so we build our entire framework for the show around a format that's questions come from an authentic place. And what I mean is we get to know the guests to the extent possible in advance, their background, their history within the space, and well before their partnerships, and we really try to do our research so that we can ask very authentically questions that come from a place of genuine curiosity. So it starts there, and we'll spend time with our guests in advance of the show, just basically walking through what our format is, what they should expect with it, and again, what our approach is. And so that's where it starts. Within the episode, we also have these different segments that we created. First is around the topic at hand, the company at hand, the project at hand that somebody's working on. And we want to understand every piece of it, every aspect of it. It starts with the origin story. You'll note we kind of have a general format that we go through where we look for that history, and we'll ask various questions that dig a little bit deeper based on that. The latest happenings, the latest partnerships, the relationships that helped form the project and have made it successful, or at least brought it to the stage that it's at now. And we don't know necessarily where the conversation will lead, and we always share that with our guests in advance. But we're looking to unearth that real backstory, that genuine backstory, the genuine interest in the founders' minds of what they want to do, what they want to accomplish, and really where they want to go. And where there are spots, I think several times that folks have the opportunity to unveil something for the first time on the show. Of course, we want to do that. We want to inspire that. We want to feel have guests feel that they're comfortable enough to share that with us. And that initial approach helps us to get there. The second piece of it that we incorporate into how we format the show is a section that we call Edge Quick Hitters. It's 10 questions we ask every guest. I think we've asked we have a lot of different guests on different episodes, but we have over 140 episodes over the last year. And these are just very simple, fun questions that tends to loosen up guests a bit. Stuff like, what's the first thing you ever purchased in your life, or what's your most prized possession? What would you pass on personality trait wise to the next generation? Things like this. Same questions for every single guest, and that lightens things up and leads us into a section where we talk about the latest happenings in the space, hot topics we call it, and you get a lot of good insights on people's perspectives when you take them through that journey, that guest journey. So, for us, it starts with the foundation of authenticity and is building that entire format around that. And it's led to, I think, some really engaging, interesting conversations, some interesting revelations, and some announcements that were really unplanned, but the comfort level between us and the guests ultimately enabled. So that's some background on how we handle things.
Yeah, and sometimes, I think because we build rapport, folks do some fun stuff on the air that even they wouldn't have predicted, right? Like Jeff was mentioning, we had a show with the CEO of Faith Tribe, and maybe it's because we talked to him at 2 a.m. in the morning, London time, but he originally was going to do a contest for our audience for a $1,000 giveaway of his token, and he had such a good time on the show. Maybe he was a little bit overtired, zealous, but he ended up breaking our record and actually doing a contest for $100,000 as our contest for that show. So, I think that comes from the type of energy that we try to create with our guests and comfort to create great content. It doesn't mean not asking the hard questions, right? We still ask those questions, but I think we do it as you would do with a friend as opposed to, someone that you don't know.
So learning before you are, interviewing, that's very, very important, to get to know your guests before they're coming on, on your podcast. And I love that you're saying that. And I love that you also say that you are talking to them as friends, not just as guests, not just as business. And that's so important when it comes to creating a conversation. And, I want to ask you, how did you guys start it? I know that a lot of people want to start a podcast. NFT is we're just at the tip of the iceberg. Everyone feels like that, they're OGs here, or they have a lot of knowledge and they would love to create podcasts, etc. But it is a lot of commitment, a lot of work, a lot of efforts, which I'm not sure everyone has, and you guys have nailed it down. So how did you basically start it? How did you think about even creating a podcast, and what would you suggest to someone who actually wants to start a podcast?
So, Tal, I think you mentioned it at the very beginning, and that is, and you mentioned it again just now, commitment, right? So, number one, you just say, we're going to do it, right? Just here's the topic, here's what we're going to talk about, just do it to start. And you got to just stick with it. You have to have that commitment. So you make the commitment and you follow through with it. Now, recording a show, there's a number of different ways to do it. You could just do a Zoom recording and upload it to any number of distribution tools, right? And you get on Spotify and iTunes and all that fun stuff. Use Transistor. We use Transistor, but it's easy, right? Super easy to get that out the door and to just do it. And if I was just starting again fresh and having never done a podcast, before, my advice to myself would be to do exactly that. Just record. Don't worry too much about your listener base. Don't worry too much about your reach and marketing efforts or anything like that. It can be overwhelming. There's so many different pieces you can think about. Just do it. Just start making content. Start distributing that content and get into that rhythm. Stick with it. Stick with it, one episode a week or every 2 weeks, whatever your schedule is. Get after it. Do that. See what it's all about. See how you like it. And then, determine your next steps from there, of which, of course, there are many, many, steps you could take. You could build up your marketing. You can enhance your distribution channels, incorporate your social approach and strategy, hire staff, support to help you, part-time, full-time, you name it, right? But just start it, do it, create something. It's awesome. Put it out in the world. It will exist basically forever at this point, right? So that's the recommendation. That's the starting point in my view. Just do it. Get it out into the world.
Yeah, and you know, Jeff and I had been business partners for many years on different ventures, including a food tech company, and then you know we came into blockchain together. We met Ethan. I was in a men's leadership group with him, and you know, ultimately we all decided this is something that needs to be talked about. We didn't know where it was going to go, but we had an idea of the potential to sort of put all of our tools in our toolkit together. And really, the podcast is the foundation for a bigger company that we've created called the Edge of Company, which is a media tech and event company. So it kind of shows you the power of a podcast as a platform or as a heartbeat, if you will, for a number of different things that you could do in your career and your life. And, you know, I was skeptical about, you know, creating a podcast, to be honest. And if you asked me 5 years ago, would I be on a podcast, I would have probably said you're crazy, right? Jeff had done a show, and Ethan's done some shows. This was my first show, and I gotta say, it's been an incredible ride, and I love what I do. I love what we do. Getting to speak with leaders, you know, shaping the future of our planet it can't get any more fun than that. So, you know, only do it if you think you'll have a good time doing it. Don't do it with sort of too strong of a perspective on where it's going to go, because you really won't know. We didn't know. But we in 1 month into doing the show, I think the three of us had a conversation where like, man, if we don't make $1 doing this, we could enjoy this for years, because it can lead to so many other, you know, ancillary benefits in our lives, and it was very enriching. So choose a format that gets you excited, choose guests that you think are amazing, and have some fun, and you know, just start. Like, don't overthink it.
I think this is so important, and one of the biggest takeaways that I'm taking from what you guys are saying is not to hesitate and not to wait for the perfect moment. You know, a lot of people trying to make it all so perfect, and everything has to be, you know, the perfect lightning. I'm sorry, perfect, you know, vocal recording materials, or everyone is trying to perfect everything. And I think that one of the most important things is actually to get started, to go ahead, jump into the water and learn to swim as you go, and see how it's in being consistent, and see how it's evolving and how it's actually growing. And I think this is a lesson for everyone on so many levels, because I know that, you know, I've created spaces and rooms for many for a long time, for many years, and it has been consistently growing. And like you guys have done, you know, starting a little bit at the beginning and then going more and more deep and getting even better and better and improving with time, instead of waiting for the perfect moment to start everything. So I love that you share that, and it's so important for so many people on so many levels, not only podcasting, but definitely if someone wants to podcast, you definitely need to get started, get your voice out there. And it look what the Edge of NFT, what Jeff and Josh have done. Amazing work. And before we move, David, you want to say something? Sorry.
Yeah, and I think there's a great thing that I'm thinking about here. Like, you know, whatever it is, whether you're an artist, whether you're a podcaster, whether you're creating like man on the street interviews at events, the cool thing is that if you're inspired by it, you never know where this stuff is going to lead. And I think, you know, I think Josh, I think you illustrated that, you know, Ethan as well, is that like this stuff, what we do now, like you couldn't have told me a year ago that I would be, you know, curated at Art Balls or doing whatever the heck I'm doing right now, because I just didn't know. But because we're so inspired by this, we could even argue that a lot of the success of NFTLA probably has a lot of roots in this podcast. Now, not to say that every podcast is going to go and produce an NFTLA, but I think the great message here is that if you're inspired by it, and even if the numbers aren't huge, or, you know, you're listening based, you never know where that's going to lead you in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 months of this ecosystem. It's really inspiring, guys.
100%. I totally agree. And I can see that, they have created such an enormous, beautiful network and so many great people that I got to interview. And I've heard some of the amazing podcasts that they create. And guys, if you haven't heard the podcast, it's the link above my head. Make sure you tap on the edge of NFT and check out their Spotify, their YouTube channel. Everything that they're creating is just really, really out of the blowing mind. Shani, I see your hand up, girl. Go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was just going to say, so I mean, I've worked with so many clients over the years starting their shows. And one thing that I think is so beautiful about social audio is that it allows people to have a zero barrier to entry when it comes to producing an audio show. And I think it's a really cool way for people to get out there without having to commit to even buying a USB mic. And I so many times I worked with clients, they would release 2-3 episodes and then they would just stop their show because they realized it wasn't for them. And I don't think podcasting is for everyone. I really don't. I think that it's something that everybody in this world apparently wants to launch now, but it might not necessarily suit what you want to do or how you want to create content. I've had people launch podcasts who end up realizing that they want to do actually more of a video show and want to have lav mics and want it to be more produced in that direction, or people who just, fall off and say, well, listen, it's actually really not for me. And they invested, a couple hundred, couple thousand, whatever it is, into a little mini studio. And they could have found that out probably a lot earlier had they launched maybe a Twitter Space show or a Spotify Live show or a Clubhouse show or a call-in show or anything along those lines. And so I totally agree with the perfectionism has to be completely thrown out the door. Like you can't really wait for that kind of a thing. But I would suggest diving into a shallow water like social audio first, seeing how you like it, seeing if you can be consistent with it, because all you need is a freaking cell phone for it. And then from there, if you're really into it, I would invest in some decent equipment. I would invest in a Shure mic. I would invest in an XLR. I wouldn't go the USB mic route, and I would do it that way. And I think that if you give yourself that time, a couple months in social audio, to see if you like it, to see if you can be consistent with it, then you realize like, okay, this is definitely for me, or it's totally not. And I think that's really one of the best things that's come out of social audio for me as a producer, someone who's worked with so many different shows before, is being like, guys, maybe you don't want to launch a show. Because I honestly can't tell you how many times I've launched shows that have gone absolutely nowhere for people because they didn't actually like doing it after a while. And it's something that people don't like to think about ever, because they just want to think about, oh, it's going to take off, it's going to grow, it's going to do this. But anyways, once Clubhouse launched, I kept telling my clients, I'm like, go on Clubhouse, see if you like it first, start doing a show there, see if you enjoy it. And it's beautiful, great tool.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Shani. And one thing I would just add there is there's definitely some distinctions between Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces and a long-form audio content show. We also do post a video on YouTube, though, Spotify, iTunes, sort of audio version has been our bread and butter historically, and that's just a lane we feel really good in. We're working on more short-form content, 30-second, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. There's a lot of production, a lot of effort, a lot of editing that goes into this, and each of these formats has different pros and cons. For whatever reason, we just felt really good about doing like a pre-orchestrated long-form content show with different segments. That's just what spoke to us. But finding that sort of path to, doing content that speaks to you is really important.
100%. I agree with all of you, and it's such amazing insights that you guys are sharing here today. I want to ask, before we move forward and before we're letting you go, guys, because we're not going to let you go. We're having so much fun here with you guys. So I want to ask you about the VCon. I know that you guys have nailed down also VCon, which was an amazing experience for so many people. But you guys, as always, have been there, and I would love to hear some insights about, what kind of insights did you get from that event, and who did you get to meet, and who did you get to speak with? And yeah, just to hear about that, because I am thirsty for information, because I haven't been there, and just happy to hear about that.
Yeah, it was such a great event. I was there with a couple other team members, Zach and another Josh. We have a lot of Joshes, by the way, way too many Joshes on our team. It was like 5 or 6 of them. So we were there the whole time. And first, just having just come off the heels of doing NFTLA, it was cool from an event organizer's perspective to see how they did their thing, right? It was in US Bank Stadium, so it was this massive, so it's a football field, it's a dome, this huge dome. It was like super cool. And what's interesting is it's inside, but there's like tremendous sunlight, and they treated it as if it were outdoors, right? So it was just something really interesting to note. There's a main stage that was totally integrated with all the other happenings around it. Food trucks off to the side. The Ferris wheel from Stranger Things was there inside the venue, like right off the seating area. You had Adirondack chairs, you had picnic tables, and then of course you're in this major stadium. The merch table was there. All this out on the main floor there, which is, I guess, basically the field. So that was just really neat to see how it integrated, and it worked. It worked really, really well. So I loved that vibe. The second thing I want to note about it is this was the biggest event I've ever been to, where everybody, basically 10,255 folks, had this very distinctive common element, and that was their VFriend holder, right? And almost anybody you talk to, you could talk to them about that experience, and it was this really, really cool way to connect with people and hear about, their interest, how they got into the space. Many of whom, by the way, that's like the only NFT they have, which was like really, really interesting. They like bought it like right away, at the beginning of the Dutch auction that Gary Vee held, and that was it. But massive Gary Vee supporters, and there to build connections, there to build relationships, to be inspired. I think that's what this event was about, like, first and foremost. You weren't going to get a bunch of technical detail around, the deets of launching a project or what tech stack you should be using or anything like that. Like, this was about inspiration. So when you hear Pharrell talk about stuff, or Seth Green, he was on stage, or Steve Aoki, who he can go deep in any category, but he was up there. This was about sparking inspiration in people. The meta purpose of this whole thing, I feel, was about continuing to bring people into the space, mass adoption, and inspiring people to do cool things. So that's like the first piece of it, organizationally and like message wise for me. Now, like, what are some like interesting tidbits? Well, number one, when I did get the chance to sit down with Gary, I was talking to him about it and asking him about how I was feeling, after about a year of planning. And he said, I feel good about it, but what I'm really excited about is year two. He's like, because year two is going to blow this thing out of the water. He's like, this is where we're going to make the big leap forward. It's next year. And so, keep an eye out for that. He's like, year three will probably look a lot more like year two, but we're going to take the next big leap forward next year. A. B, he had noted that VCon really, it didn't come about in parallel with VFriends, right? He didn't develop it because he released VFriends as as an NFT, and VCon being part of the big utility there, right? It was actually something he'd been working on separately for a long time, based on some other event experience that he had. So that was kind of interesting to hear, that this had been in the works. He just wasn't sure of how he was going to bring people together. And it just ended up being a really perfect fit. But yeah, next year, that was the big thing from Gary. Next year was the big one. We got to sit down with a number of different folks. But I will say that like Todd Kaplan from Pepsi, the CMO of Pepsi, he was a really interesting person to speak with. His considerations for doing anything in the space are so vast, it's like hard to even fathom. It's a public company, it's a global brand, it's got all these stakeholders. It's a traditional kind of bureaucracy, slow moving machine, by all accounts. And so being a champion of NFTs and crypto in that world is pretty tricky, right? Any kind of commitments you make, any involvement, any drops you do, every word you say can influence millions of stakeholders' lives and move the needle for their company in really big ways. So it was just cool to hear his perspective. They're doing a lot, and that's what was cool to me. Like, he's like, what? Yeah, I get all that, and it's a lot on my shoulders, but we're doing it anyway. So I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. Especially relatively early in the history of NFTs from a mainstream perspective, to see a company like that ready to move and actually do some cool stuff. I think anybody that was there that had the opportunity to hear Jesse Isler speak, would echo what I'm saying. Anybody that didn't get to hear him speak also heard about his talk. It was a super inspirational talk. This is founder of Marquis Jets and like Zico Coconut Water, inspirational speaker, amazing guy, just completely crushed it. We're talking like, I don't know, like top 1% of TED level talks that he gave. Really, it was very autobiographical talk about the history of his professional career and how that intersected with some of the values that his father instilled in him. And he did it in such a cool, interesting way. He left everybody most certainly in tears and filled with inspiration. I just wanted to note that talk, and if at any point they release it, please go check it out, because if it doesn't move you, then I don't know what can. So that was cool.
Hey Jeff, I'm thinking about an interview that Ethan did with a young Ukrainian woman that raised a lot of money for Ukraine using NFTs, and apparently they were both crying by the end of that show. I haven't listened to it yet, but it sounds like the tears were flying across the world.
That was in VCon?
Yeah.
No, that was another interview. So Ethan separately interviewed a woman that did a big fundraiser for Ukraine, and then also he interviewed Dre, one of the very talented music producer. We did a lot of interviews together, but sometimes we're in different parts of the road, so down the street from each other. So there were some pieces of content that we did separately. So we were dividing and conquering in Minnesota and Davos, and then we're further subdividing and conquering from there. Fortunately, having 3 hosts helped us get a lot of content.
Indeed. I think the big thing, again, for Gary V's event, VCon, it's the kind of thing you go to for inspiration. You could beat them up all day over like very specific technical content, but that's just not what it's about. And I think for any event, as event coordinators, like doing a really good job of sharing what it's all about, like what the purpose is, and or if you have different tracks, like how to convey that so people know where to go for the content they're looking for, and or for the inspiration they're looking for, and be really clear about that, so you know who your audience is, and delivering on your promises to that audience. Like that to me is such a big thing. And I feel like most of the folks that were there at VCon knew what they were coming to, and they delivered really, really well on those promises. And I mean, in Gary's own words, next year will be bigger and better. So he's a guy that delivers on his promises. I can't wait for that one.
Amazing. I'm curious, to hear, how do you guys get to all these things? I mean, how do you guys organize in advance who you're going to talk with? Like, I'm just curious, as someone who thought maybe to do a podcast once in my life, I was always thinking, how do they reach to all these people? Like, it's all people you approach advance or through?
Yeah. So I'll jump in here. I do a lot of our booking. It's a combination of being opportunistic, serendipitous, and also doing some planning, right? So with the show, we have 2 shows a week. We do one which is more focused on emerging projects, and another that's focused, we call it the top 1% show, where it's like leaders in companies like Polygon or Solana, or we just recently had Eric Calderon from Art Blocks on. Man, that was a really fun show. I hope folks get a chance to listen to that. Such an authentic dude. With that type of stuff, sometimes it's planned weeks or months in advance. We book our top 1% show out, 8 to 12 weeks in advance. And our emerging projects, those schedules change a little bit, right? When you think you're going to do a drop 1 week, and then you have to move it 2 weeks because, the market falls out or something happens. So those are planned out usually more like, 4 to 8 weeks in advance. But it started out with a lot of outbound outreach, and now we get quite a lot of inbound. We usually get about 30 to 50 requests a week to be on the show, which makes it a little stressful because you want to include everyone. But that would be 50 hours of content a week, and that's just not possible, right? So we try to do hot topics to include some folks. And then when it comes to the roadshow side of it, similar sort of thing. We know who we've talked to, who we want to talk to, and we coordinate directly with those individuals or coordinate with the conference producers or the PR team, depending on the situation and the level of pedigree of the speaker. Some people have a little bit more process, and some people have 3 or 4 layers that you have to go through. So you have to do some planning, and then when you get there, there's always opportunities that come up. And sometimes people haven't seen your emails or got really preoccupied with something else they were coming out of. And you sort of leave some room in your schedule for serendipity. So it's that sort of 1-2 punch.
Amazing. Amazing, guys. This was such a pleasure to have you here and to listen to all those insights. And where can people actually go to listen to all those recordings and all those adventures that you had and you're sharing with them? Where's the best place just to go?
Yeah, we try to be available wherever you like to go. That said, following us on Twitter is always a great start, at Edge of NFT and at NFT LA Live. A lot of the short form content and the bits and pieces, the highlights are posted there. And then for the long form show, you can use whatever sort of your normal podcast listening device is. If it's Spotify or iTunes, follow us on those 2 places. And then, there's a lot of content. So feel free to pick and choose your favorites or, start at wherever we are now. Don't get overwhelmed by the archive, if you will, though there's some good evergreen content in there. And some of our early shows are still often listened to. So those are the things. And then you can also join our newsletter at edgeofnft.com. And you can join our NFT LA newsletter at nftla.live. So 2 different newsletters, different content. NFTLA.live, we're featuring more events happening around the country besides just our event. More cool things that we're going to be at that the community's doing. So they're totally different newsletters, and if you're going to subscribe to one, why not pick both?
Love it. Thank you, Josh. And thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much for all these amazing insights. It has been a pleasure speaking with you and learning about your podcast. And everyone who's not been following yet, Edge of NFT and NFT LA and Josh and Jeff's work, that's the time to do so. There's a link above my head. Make sure you tap on that and make sure you check out their Spotify and YouTube channel and everything that they're bringing out to the world. Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, thanks, guys, for being here and just being everything that you guys are in the ecosystem, in the space, in the audio format, in the IRL. For anybody that's out there, every podcast that we come across has a different tone, has a different energy. Every commentator, narrator has a different personality. And, what you guys bring is very level, very grounded, very sound, and I don't know if sober is the right word, but just really matter of fact. And I think there's something really powerful about that, because a lot of other podcasts are chock full of sound effects and explosions and everything else. But no, you guys really deliver something really, really grounded and sophisticated. And so I just want to throw you guys some love, man. It's such a pleasure to be connected to you guys.
Hey, thanks so much for having us. What a great conversation. We really appreciate it. Much love all around.
Thank you so much. And we're going to go to our next guest here on stage, who is Pio. Good morning, Pio. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing very well. Great to be here. How are you guys?
Pio, 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 Pio.
GM. So, guys, if you don't know Pio, first of all, he's such a sweet guy. I'm already a big fan of him for a while. And he has an amazing NFT podcast on YouTube with over 27,000 subscribers and thousands of views for every, I think it's even 10,000 of views on every episode that he's bringing out. He has amazing numbers and values to his audience as well. And if you don't know the morning show, the Nifty's Alpha Show, of course, then you better check out Pio's morning shows. He has every morning. I think it's every morning, right, Pio? Or is it a few times a week?
Monday through Friday.
Monday through Friday. Unbelievable, this consistency that you guys have. So he's co-host over there. Sometimes he's hosting something. He's hosting amazing show every morning that brings tons of value and alpha and info to everyone. So welcome on the stage. And I want to do a quick reset, guys. By the way, we're at Docs episode number 13. We're talking about best podcasts today, and we're here every Tuesday. I just wanted to throw it out there to those who don't know. It's me, David Bianchi, and Swansea who are hosting it every Tuesday at 10 a.m. PDT, which is 1 p.m. at the East. And now we have Pio with us. And Pio, I wonder, what brings you more joy? The spaces that you're hosting or the YouTube channel podcast that you're launching? Because there's so much work, both of them. We just spoke about consistency and about how much work it is to produce a podcast. We have amazing podcasters like Josh and Jeff on stage and Shani. So I wonder on your end, what is more, I don't know if enjoyable, but like, what do you like to do more? The spaces in the morning or the YouTube channel? Or is there something you like more? What do you feel about that? Just curious.
Sure. So, I mean, like, for example, right before this on the YouTube channel, we had NBA champion Kendrick Perkins and, current ESPN basketball analyst on the show. And I really enjoy stuff like that because it's like we get to do a deep dive and it's like a proper podcast. And I've always been a podcast fan and I studied podcasts for years before I started actually doing them myself. So I definitely really enjoy episodes like that. But if it's between a normal podcast show and the morning Twitter show, my preference is the morning Twitter show because of the audience that we have on that, consistently one of the largest audiences in the NFT space. And I get to see cool people like, Waka Flocka Flame and Kendrick Perkins. He started listening to that show and that's how we got introduced. Just seeing really cool people in the crowd in real time, whereas on YouTube, you don't really know what you're going to get. And then on the subject of not knowing what you're going to get, I also like letting random people on the stage for the Twitter show to see what kind of crazy stuff happens from there. And you create moments in a live podcast like that you aren't able to create otherwise. So I definitely prefer that morning show, with the exception of when we have really fantastic guests like Perkins today on the actual podcast.
Amazing, and YouTube has been here since a while, right? When did you actually start the YouTube channel? I wonder if that came before the Spaces. I believe so, or maybe I'm wrong. What was the first one that you started with, and how did you decide to start? How did you? I mean, it's so much work.
Yeah, so I personally started a YouTube channel in early 2021. Right when I started buying NFTs. So that was March 2021, and nobody watched that. And then I did another channel with these guys, Nifty Culture, who David knows. And me and those guys built up a little bit of buzz. I got a chance to interview guys like David. That's how I got introduced to David. And really talented artists like Blake Catherine and Tom Yu and Jason Safe, like a lot of really, really talented NFT artists, or artists from the NFT space, I should say, guys like Tom Bilyeu as well from Impact Theory. And then in August of 2021, I met Nick. I got introduced to Nick from our mutual friend. He goes by Kix now. At the time, he was going by Sophisticated Art Speculator. And then the three of us started doing a Twitter space in August. And then right after Labor Day, so early September, we added the YouTube. And then by October, I want to say, we founded the company. By December, we had raised funding. And then by January, we put out the NFT. So that's kind of the order of events that happened for us to get to where we're at now.
Amazing. And you're doing the YouTube channel by yourself, or you have a team, or how does it work? Did you build out a whole team around it, or just one person, or you do it by yourself?
Yes, I mean, at our business, right, we have paid content contributors. So we have Depeche Node and Benjamin, Micah G, Easy Eats Bodega. They're all on the payroll as content creators. So I do a show with each of them once a week. All of our content, both Twitter and YouTube, is live streamed. And then we have an editor that repurposes the live streamed content for Twitter posts and TikTok posts. I've learned the power of TikTok because we aren't even performing that well on TikTok, but the TikTok has more views than the YouTube channel does, and the TikTok's only been around for 3 or 4 months. We have a designer that does all of our all of our thumbnails, all of our visual assets, and then we have operational and administrative employees that assist with the descriptions of the videos, repurposing the YouTube content as a podcast and things like that. So we have like a $10,000 per month plus payroll for all of our content. So it's definitely not just me.
So I'm just curious, and Drew, I see your hand up, but I do want to ask you, so someone who wants to start, right? Wants to start a YouTube channel, because you guys are doing a tremendous work, amazing work. I mean, I saw your videos and I love the vibe, and it's so much fun, and it looks like it's edited and it's been curated very perfectionally. But how do you go when someone wants to start something new? Do you think he needs to to be able to get a whole team around him, or should he just start? What would you suggest to someone who actually wants to start a YouTube channel, do a podcast about NFTs or anything related to that?
If it's NFT specific, I would say that you should start with a Twitter Spaces, because we originally thought that YouTube was the better platform for NFT related content, but it turns out the number one, without a doubt, it's like a Michael Saylor, there is no second best type of situation. The number one is Twitter, and so Twitter Spaces falls under that umbrella. So I'd say if you're interested specifically in an NFT or a crypto podcast, then you should do Twitter Spaces. And then if you want to, do even better, then you record the Twitter Space and then you upload the Twitter Space as a podcast, and you can upload it to YouTube too. So that's after the fact. If you want to do a more general, I mean, look, it's not bad to do YouTube. Like, we have over 1 million hits on YouTube. There's a dedicated YouTube fan base. I did nothing but YouTube for 6 months of 2021 before I had the ability to host Twitter Spaces and before I understood the real value of Twitter Spaces. So it doesn't hurt to do YouTube. But I'm just, sharing from my experience that Twitter is not the number one highest impact platform for the NFT and crypto space without question. And so you definitely want to be doing your podcast as a Twitter Space, because that's how people are going to see it. And for example, when we're having, all right, I guess I'll just spill the beans here. We're having Gary Vee come on our show, and it was like, do we do it on, and he came on the Twitter show before, but this time it'll be like a longer segment. And so it was like, should we do it on YouTube or do it on Twitter? And it was like, no question, we should do it on Twitter. It's cooler to do it on YouTube. Like, it's cooler for me to walk away with a screenshot where it's me and Gary talking on YouTube, and I can tell people, hey, look, this is me and Gary Vee. But the bottom line is the highest impact is on Twitter Spaces. And last little tip I'd give to people is the number one thing when it comes to making content is consistently making content, like all the time, and not stopping. So for me personally, the most important thing was live stream, so that I don't have to edit content and it's just out on the internet forever after the fact. So I would say if you can figure out a way to make your content a live stream, then that's going to be an easy way to do it. But understand that the YouTube algorithm is not going to favor you in the same way as if you're doing like a Mr. Beast style, super high frequency edits, on 9 to 15 minute videos, because that's what the YouTube algorithm favors.
So how do you live stream? Just curious. On YouTube, you do that?
So we use a platform called Restream, which is very much so like an entry level platform. It is not complex. It's not the most complex platform. And with Restream, you're able to stream. We stream to YouTube. And we stream to all of our Twitter profiles. So we stream to my Twitter profile, Nick's Twitter profile, and our company's Twitter profile, just to get the content in as many places as possible.
That's amazing. It's kind of, repurposing the content, so you don't just use it for one place. A lot of people thinking, how am I going to create so many content to so many channels? But then you can just repurpose the same content on different channels because you have different audiences on different places. So I love that insight. Drew, you have a question? I see your hand up.
I have a lot of questions for Pia if you're going to give me the floor. My name is Drew Roberts.eth, and I'm a poor man's version of what Pio's doing. I also agree and endorse this message that you should record a podcast as a Twitter Spaces, and you should live stream it on YouTube and do all the things that he's doing and play the algorithm games on all platforms. It's a way of being a distributed network on every platform. My podcast is Web3 Journey, and I'm just learning from Pio and all the things he's been doing for years, and just following in his footsteps as a smaller scale version of what he's doing. I have a lot of respect. So thank you.
Amazing, Drew. Thank you for sharing that.
Paul,
Pio, yeah, what's up, Shani?
The algorithm side,
Sure.
I think is super important to note. I mean, I don't want to share this because I'm not like dying to have more competition, but YouTube Shorts is legitimately killing it right now, and they're pushing those hardcore. And I agree with those 9 to 10 minute high frequency edits. They love those as well. But the Shorts, I was just talking to somebody who works at YouTube, actually at VCon, and he was like, and I was like, I know YouTube Shorts, and he goes, no, you don't know. YouTube Shorts, like they are pushing those a disgusting amount. So definitely recommend that, Pio, if you're repurposing. I'm sure you're already doing. I need to check out more, but yeah, super hard.
And just to piggyback off that, look at what the platforms are doing and what they're promoting. And don't be scared of Facebook either. Meta promotes stuff, and they have for a decade plus. So just play the games of the platforms and be on every platform and put your content out and onboard normies to crypto.
Yeah, I think to comment on that, and by the way, Drew's up here saying all these nice things, but Drew came on the show the other day and just trolled on the show on the stage for about 2 minutes. So Drew's like a Jekyll and Hyde here. He also told me that he was going to get Raul Paul on our show, and he adds me to the email thread with Raul Paul's assistant, and the lady just says no immediately. So Drew's a character, ladies and gentlemen, trying to figure him out.
Who came on my podcast, but he didn't want to come on yours for some reason. I'm like, this is a bigger podcast. Why? If mine was worth your time, Pio's for sure is worth your time.
Yeah. Well, anyway, what I was going to say is like when you're looking at content, you also have to know like what you're looking to accomplish with the content. So like, let's say you want to focus on YouTube Shorts or TikTok or Snapchat. There's all these different platforms that you can focus on. You have to understand what each one is good for. So, for example, I wouldn't be surprised if we've gotten 0 buyers of our NFT through TikTok. Like, I literally think that the number, even though there's millions of views on our TikTok, I think the number of buyers that have come from TikTok is legitimately 0. And the number of people in our like Discord community from TikTok is probably 0. So if you want to pad your stats and go on if I wanted to focus on Snapchat tomorrow, and just try to, juice our stats on Snapchat so that maybe we can go to a sponsor or like an advertising agency and say, here are our numbers of unique impressions across platforms. That would be the purpose of that. But the purpose would not be to get new community members, like valuable community members in our Discord or, potential NFT holders, because that's just not what comes from those platforms. So you need to have a goal or just a general idea of what you're looking to accomplish with any action that you're taking. And for example, if you want to build an NFT business, Twitter is the #1 platform.
Well, that's good to hear. I mean, a lot of people are debating, YouTube or Twitter or TikTok. And I guess that according to what you say, Twitter is the best. And you probably, the most expert in that. I wanted to ask you one more thing, another thing about time management. I know that, creating a video on YouTube takes much longer than creating a Twitter space. I mean, not longer, but it creates, you have to edit it. You have to invite, you have to, how do you manage time when it comes to your YouTube channel for a lot of people who want to start YouTube channel, they want to start a podcast on YouTube channel, but then YouTube has a visualize. So you have, there's a video over there. It's not just a voice. It's not just audio. So how do you actually build out your either calendar or Gantt or like, how do you build your strategy for the YouTube channel when it comes to guests? Do you approach them in advance? Do you just meet them on stages? Or how exactly do you go when it times management for your YouTube channel?
Yeah, so before I got into like NFT podcasting, my creative and content background was as a music video director, right? And that's like a pretty heavy lift in terms of editing. I mean, that's like real creative exertion, and it takes a lot of time, and you kind of can see how much work goes in before you actually create a video. And that would be what I would describe as like guest dependent content, right? Because you have to actually have a relationship with the musician, do all the scheduling, make it happen, right? So that's like the most extreme version of what you're talking about. Then when my first 6 to 7 months of doing NFT content on YouTube, it was 100% guest dependent content, which is what you're talking about, which is reaching out to people for the podcast, getting them scheduled, getting them on, you being prepared for it. And then if you don't do live stream, there's a whole layer of additional work with the editing and everything that comes along with that, right? So what we realized was that we didn't want to actually do a guest dependent podcast when Nick and I got together. And so Nick and Kix, our podcast for the first like 4 months was just the three of us. And we would do it every day on a live stream. And it would just be the three of us day in and day out, no guests. And we literally were like, this is the best thing ever. This is unbelievable. Like, we just show up every day, the three of us, and we do the show. And people like it more than if we had guests, right? And so there are occasional guests, like, for example, today, Kendrick Perkins. However, we didn't want to do guest-dependent content because I knew how exhausting that was from the 6 or 7 months that I did it last year. So I guess my answer is, if you are doing guest-dependent content, it can be pretty exhausting, and like at least 30 or 40% of your job is going to be identifying and reaching out to guests for your show, making sure that they're briefed, and all that good stuff. At the highest level, right? When you're at like the Joe Rogan, Mark Maron, or these huge podcasts, you have like teams that do that. But when you're first getting started, it can be much more time consuming. But what I would say is, when you're first getting started, you probably also need quality relationships. And that's probably going to be one of the ways that you develop those quality relationships. So in many ways, it's kind of a rite of passage as well. But there's no doubt that doing guest-dependent content is very time consuming, and it can be exhausting for sure.
And I think that's why you also said that people should start on Twitter Spaces, because that's where you actually build your network, and actually you build your relationships that you can after bring to your YouTube channel show, right? I guess
1,000%. Like
right.
Yeah, it's the
Right.
best. I mean, Kendrick Perkins came from the Twitter space, and one time Katie Couric popped onto our Twitter space. We never did anything like more with her afterwards, but like it was just kind of crazy that she popped up and came on stage and like spoke. You really never know who's going to pop onto those spaces. And like, I remember Crazy Crypto Carl, when he did his big Twitter space with Beeple, Jack Dorsey, like, the former CEO of Twitter, the founder of Twitter, was in the crowd. And I was just like, what? Like, that is just insane. He like tweeted it out, So I am a huge Twitter Spaces person. I also think that we're early to Twitter Spaces, considering, Clubhouse emerged. And I know David comes from Clubhouse, and Tal, you might come from there too. I know Swan does. That emerged in very early 2021, maybe late 2020. It definitely rose to prominence in early 2021. And then, Twitter Spaces emerged probably by March, April, May of 2021, and not everyone could do it, right? So you saw guys like Deez really capitalize on Twitter Spaces and build a big name, a big network. And obviously he was an OG already, but I really kind of witnessed him explode through Twitter Spaces. And I still think that we're in like a nascent period with Twitter Spaces, and that it's only going to continue as long as Twitter itself doesn't shit the bed, which is totally on the table.
100%. And yes, I also came from Clubhouse. I've been hosting constantly like you know, rooms every week, and I got the 40,000 followers there that I neglected literally for Twitter because I just moved in here. Like I took my suitcases from Clubhouse and I moved into Twitter Spaces. So I totally relate to what you're saying. Um, you know, for the finale, before I'm going to let you go, because I don't want to ever let you go, and I want to keep you locked in this space forever and ever, because it's so much fun to speak with you. um, but I do want to ask you, do you guys are going to events as well, or are you recording in a studio, or are you going outside and creating podcasts that are, you know, out of the four walls, or, you know, just curious for those who haven't seen yet your podcast, and how is it going with your schedule? I mean, are you flying to events to host podcasts, or like to interview people, or are you bringing them into your space? How does it work technically? Just curious.
Yeah, so right now it's been largely remote. When we rented the house in Cape Cod for a month earlier this year, we did like a little business boot camp where we just lived under the same roof for a month so that we could just totally focus on the business. That was all in-person content, and our audience really, really enjoyed that a lot. And we love doing that. So we'll definitely be doing more of that. I'm moving to New York, back to New York, you know, after a 2-year hiatus, the week of NFT NYC, and I'm moving to the same block as Nick is in Brooklyn, so we're going to be neighbors over there. And he doesn't want me to say this, but Nick has like a big apartment, and he's always like, don't tell anyone about the apartment. I don't want people to think that I'm rich and like all this stuff. So he's got like a big apartment. I think we're going to use one of the rooms as a studio and like paint it and all that. So you'll probably see some in-person content from us then. And then, you know, Nick was a speaker at VCon. He absolutely killed it. He tried to get me as a speaker, and they were just like, nah, we're good, you know. But I think in the future, I watched Swan host at VCon. She hosted, I think it was with Logan Paul, was her spot. So like huge spot. And I was like, oh, that'd be cool. Like I would totally do that. So maybe that's in the future at these events. I think we are going to do a panel at NFT NYC. NFT NYC was a complete shit show last year. So we'll see if it is this year again. And then we are going to allegedly, I'll believe it when I see it, but allegedly, it seems like it's true, we're going to do the Twitter show from a live stage at Metaverse Miami in August. Like I have questions about the technical side of that to execute that properly. However, the guy I'm dealing with over there, Kenobi, really seems on the ball. And so I think we're going to do that. But I said to Nick, I was like, within 2 or 2.5 years, I wouldn't be surprised if we actually do the podcast like on the road, like we're actually touring. So I wouldn't be surprised if that ends up happening too. But yeah, I mean, in-person content, I think, is favored by the audience. Like I don't think any audience member is going to prefer, you know, not in-person content. And when you look at some of the really successful crypto podcasts like Pomp's podcast and, you know, there's a ton of huge podcasts, No Jumper and all these different podcasts, all that stuff is in person. So I think we do have to graduate to that. Absolutely.
Amazing. I don't understand who wouldn't let you speak anywhere. I mean, I would have you everywhere. I would host. Everywhere, yes, definitely. And NFT NYC, I hope to see you as well. And so much fun having you here, Pio. You're definitely one of my favorites since I got to know you. And if you don't follow up on after Pio, that's the time to definitely do so and check out his podcast on YouTube and his show every morning. And being consistent, this is the key in all these conversation on this stage today. You know, being consistent starts without even hesitate. Just get started. If you don't start, you're never going to start because everyone's looking for the perfection. Everyone wants everything to be perfect and to be aligned. The lighting has to be perfect. The audio has to be perfect. No, nothing has to be perfect. You can perfect it as you go. You can improve it as you go, and you can learn as you go. And I think that Pio and you know, and also Josh and Jeff, who have been here, has shown us how much just, you know, consistency and jump into the water and start to swim and start to create. That's how the way to go. Pio, it's been such a pleasure. I don't want to hold you too much. I know that you have lots of things going on, and I so appreciate that you came here today. Do you have anything that you want to add? Do you want to share? Where can people see your YouTube channel? share with them a little bit. I put a link above my head, by the way, guys. So if you haven't checked out yet Pio's link, his interview with the NBA champion, with Kendrick Perkins, it's on the link above my head, and also anything that he does, it's in this link. But Pio, anything you want to add before we wrap up with the conversation with you? Because it's been so much fun. I can talk to you for hours, but I don't want to keep you longer than you need.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the kind words, Tal, and it's always great to catch up with you and David, and you know, I know Swan is usually here too. What I was just going to say is, like, what you said about just starting really is one of the most important, if not the most important things, because in between when I was doing, you know, my music video career and now with the NFT content, I was like, so I'm just going to do cooking videos. I was like, I'm going to do cooking videos with sick hip hop beats in the back and chop them up deep and, like, you know, this, that, and the other thing, right? And I shot a bunch of different stuff. I bought different gear. I would shoot with like one set of gear. I'd be like, no, that's not the look I'm looking for. I'd get other gear. I'm like switching between DSLR cameras and my phone. I was like buying lenses for the phone because I read that Steven Soderbergh did 3 movies on the iPhone with these lenses, so I'm buying the lenses. You know, I'm like, then I'm like, oh, but like this recipe's not dope enough. I need to, like, you know, dial it back and see what they were cooking 5,000 years ago, like, you know, all this stuff, right? And I never released a single cooking video. I never even fully finished editing one. Like, I edited 80% of like 5 different ones. And so you really do have to just figure out a way to get the stuff out there. And yeah, in my opinion, live stream is the number one way. So if you really are looking to get into content, number one, understand that it's a long game. It's not a get rich quick thing at all. Number two, you have to actually love it. You have to like doing it. Otherwise, like, good God, you know, it's just never going to work because it takes so long and so much time. So you got to enjoy it. And number three, you have to be ready to be creative with how you're going to monetize it. Because, you know, the days of just paying the bills with YouTube, they're over. Like, our YouTube channel has over 1 million views on it. It gets over 100,000 views a month, I think, right? Yeah, like, yeah, exactly. Like, definitely over 100,000 views a month. And we make $1,000 a month off of the YouTube channel, like off of the ad revenue. So it's not what it used to be.
Okay, I have to chime in quickly because can I just say I'm staring right now at my closet, which has 4 aprons with my cooking nickname on them, because I also purchased a DSLR and a bunch of fucking gear that I read that was great for cooking videos because I wanted to elevate my phone cooking videos. And honestly, I recorded one, never even got to editing it. The butternut squash soup, it's sitting in my freaking drive right now. I can't explain how relatable that was, but I did actually release some cooking videos just on my phone. But all the gear that I bought, yeah, unused, sitting there, useless.
Yeah, it's you got to just find something that you can do all the time, because no one, like, unless you're Elon Musk and people are already watching everything that you do, no one like can build a career off just making one video, right? So you have to be in a spot that you can put out content all the time. And we put out content basically 7 days a week. Like, yesterday we took a day off from the Twitter space because it was Memorial Day, and I was just riddled with guilt all day. And people were like tweeting at me saying that, you know, we should have done the show, and people were like, oh, it's only a holiday in the United States, and I was like, yeah, you got a point. I was just riddled with guilt all day. So when we did Easy Eats Bodega's Solana show at 5 p.m., which we just launched and we're in the second week of now, so that's the second show on our network, if you will, it made me feel a lot better. I was like, all right, cool, I didn't take the whole day off, you know.
Amazing. Amazing. Seriously, man. I mean, this consistency and all the tips that you just gave here are priceless. And thank you so much. So much. I love listening to you. And now I also love watching you because I saw your YouTube channel just recently. I was always listening to you in the mornings, and I rediscovered your YouTube channel, and I'm just addicted. So thank you so much for that, and for the wonderful wisdom that you shared here with us on stage today. And guys, again, make sure you follow Pio if you haven't yet.
Thanks so much for having me. See you guys.